Welcome to Colorado State University's podcast, The Audit, where host Stacy Nick talks with CSU faculty about topics ranging from their latest research to current events.
The holiday season is full of traditions we can't help but love. Sledding, sipping hot cocoa by the fire, and of course, binge-watching those delightfully predictable holiday TV movies. You know the ones. A big city single woman heads to a charming small town, crosses paths with a rugged local, discovers the true meaning of the season, saves the day, and falls head over heels in love. But for film and media researcher Kit Hughes, there's one character in these cheery tales who often steals the spotlight, the scrappy small business owner. Whether they're front and center or in the background, this character represents more than just a feel-good holiday trope. After diving deep into the formula behind Hallmark's vast catalog of holiday movies, Hughes uncovered how these films go beyond heartwarming romances to explore big ideas about economics, morality, and who gets to be the hero and who is the villain. I recently sat down with the Colorado State University professor to learn how these sappy classics tell a deeper story. Spoiler alert, beneath all of that holiday cheer and cheese, these predictable flicks can pack a surprisingly powerful punch. So this research began kind of as a way to look at how film and television shape our ideas about the economy and our understanding about things like Wall Street and owning a business. And I have to say, as someone whose entire working knowledge of the stock market comes directly from the movie Trading Places, I feel a little targeted there. So how did the idea of looking at this through the lens of Hallmark movies come into play?
Yeah, well, first of all, Trading Places is an excellent Christmas film. And I also remember coming out of that film as a 10-year-old thinking, now the time is ripe to get in concentrated orange futures. So a lot of the work that I do looks at films about the economy, but that are produced by economic institutions like the New York Stock Exchange. So in previous work, I've looked at how the stock exchange creates films for investors to explain what it means to invest and why people should invest. And increasingly, I've been interested in more popular representations of the economy. And in particular, I've been really interested in the characters that animate the narratives that we tell over and over again about how the economy works, who it works for, and that sort of thing. And the character I've really locked into, that I've really been interested in, is the small business owner. So I've been watching a lot of Bar Rescue. I've been watching a lot of Cheers, Nathan For You, Fixer Upper. Once you start thinking about this character, it really is inescapable. And in terms of Hallmark in particular, as I was thinking about the small business owner, I was also, like many Americans, watching Hallmark Christmas films with my family. It became part of my holiday tradition, especially over the last 5 or so years. And as I was watching these films that have become massively popular, I realized that the small business owner is a hugely important part of what makes them so cozy, so fun to watch. In particular, the thing that I think is so interesting is you have this set of films that are ostensibly about the Christmas holidays, a time when people have off to spend with their family, to relax after a year of work and that sort of thing. And yet, at the center of so many of these films are a bunch of people who are working this whole time. And so what is it about small business work that is so appealing? That question is really what got me into these films.
I think anyone who's watched a Hallmark movie, probably a lot of people who haven't watched a Hallmark movie, they know that there's a well-worn formula to these films. There's the fish out of water element. There's the big city single woman going to the country or back to her small hometown. There's a holiday or an annual competition, and there's that plucky small business owner. And it may be a main character, it may be a side character, but it's always there. What does that character signify in these movies?
You're absolutely right. These are very formulaic films to the extent that you can go online and download any number of bingo cards to use as you watch alongside these films. Snowball fight, check. Gingerbread competition, check. Ugly sweater, check. Even Hallmark released its own bingo card, right? Recognizing that there is a formula to these films, and that's where some of the pleasure lies. So thinking about this formula, one of the things that really interests me is as Hallmark continues to make these films year after year, what part of the formula stays the same and what parts of the formula can change but still have the films feel like those cozy Christmas Hallmark movies that we've come to love. In particular, I was really interested in this question in the early 2020s when Hallmark was undergoing something of a transition. There was a scandal in 2019 that broke when the CEO pulled an ad that featured two women kissing. And then there was this huge backlash. It resulted in his resignation. Hallmark hired a new CEO, Wanya Lucas, and the company publicly committed to improving their LGBT representation. And Wanya Lucas herself committed to expanding the kinds of storylines that, say, women could have in these films. She even said explicitly, "I don't think women need to quit their jobs." And so I was really interested when the formula is changing, it's expanding, it's becoming more inclusive, are there things that must be there that make sure that it's cozy, that make sure that it's Christmassy? The small business owner is one of those critical keystones of the formula because the small business owner, as it's used within these films, embodies a very particular fantasy. It's a fantasy that includes independence and freedom for the small business owner, but matches that with a sense of strong family connection and thriving local communities, which the small business owner is also very heavily engaged in and supports.
It's interesting because in your study, you include the Pew Research study that looked at what institutions Americans trust the most. And number one, not by a little, but by a huge majority, was small business owners, even ahead of the military, ahead of churches, ahead of schools. What is it about small business owners that makes them such a powerful symbol in American culture?
That study, when I first found it, was one of those bits of data that let me know that I was on the right track. I kind of couldn't believe how much of a gap there was between the small business owner and these other key institutions, religious organizations, the military, as you mentioned. And in that same study, large corporations rank lowest in terms of the institutions that Americans believe are actually improving our way of life. And I think there are a few different things happening here. One, trust in American institutions is historically low, and that's driven a lot by partisan divides. We have different organizations that have become heavily politicized, like higher education or unions. And the small business owner hasn't been politicized in the same way. And I think there are some reasons for that. I think within American culture, there is this idea that anyone can be a small business owner. And not only can anyone be a small business owner, maybe everyone should be a small business owner and start their own small business. The other thing that I think is at play here is what people think about when they think about the category of small business. So if you're like me, when I think small business, I'm thinking of, for example, the local pizzeria where the owners were friends of my parents. Or I'm thinking of the small health food grocery store that my mom managed for a decade. Or I'm thinking of Wolverine here in town where I like to get my coffee and I can shop for books if I want to. These are institutions that are within our own communities where even if we don't personally know the people who work there or who own these organizations, we might recognize the same people when we go in and grab our coffee or order a beer. They provide real services to our community. And so I think people have a sense of the importance of small business in their community, to local jobs, to a tangible part of the economy. And I think those are reasons why when people hear small business, they tend to really support it. Now, the thing that is complicated here is there is the idea of the small business that many of us hold in our heads. Let's say a business that has 3 or 4 employees, where the owner is involved in the day-to-day operation of the store. Its purpose isn't necessarily to expand to other states or across the country. There's that idea. And then there's the definition of the small business that the Small Business Administration uses. And that is the definition that drives a lot of our governmental policy, funding subsidies, and that sort of thing. And if you use that definition, 99.9% of all businesses are classified as small business. When we think about this in the context of Hallmark, we can think about how the Small Business Administration would set the limits for the certain kinds of companies that we see over and over again, because these are based on industry. So, for example, a small retail bakery can have 500 employees and be considered a small business. A cookie manufacturer, and you know there are a lot of cookie manufacturers in Hallmark movies,
Oh, yes.
They can have up to 1,250 employees. So certain small businesses can make tens of millions of dollars and still be classified as small. So there's something really interesting here where the sort of cultural idea that we have of the small business might not always match up with the way that the small business is mobilized in our tax policy or legal policy or regulation and that sort of thing.
Now, you watched 40 Hallmark movies, which hats off to you.
I did it so you didn't have to.
You watched every single one that was released in the year 2022. What did these movies tell you about how we see the role of the small business owner?
In these films, I think we can see the role of the small business owner as something that is pretty unique, insofar as it resolves very real tensions and desires for folks to balance work and life, to balance individual freedom and connection to community and family. So in these films, a lot of times our small business owners get to have their cake and eat it too. And, oftentimes they're also making that cake.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because something that I always struggle with in these types of movies is the fantastical elements. And I don't mean things like an ice sculpture of a man coming to life and becoming the romantic interest of the female lead, which is not a Hallmark Christmas movie, but is eerily similar to Hallmark's formula. I'm talking about the more basic elements of these stories, such as the small business owner having any kind of life outside of their business, which if you ask anyone who owns a business, they would say is just as ridiculous as the ice sculpture storyline. They also ignore any realistic issues or inequalities or systemic barriers to success. What does this trope offer these characters, and why are these real aspects excluded from the narrative?
I love thinking about this as fantastical on the level of an ice sculpture coming to life, because you're not too far off. There's so much research about how difficult it is not only to start a small business, but to keep it going. And it really does take an incredible toll on people's lives, on their families. And so it's really funny, again, that we have this small business owner at the heart of these films that are meant to be cozy, family-oriented, magical. So I think the small business owner resolves some really critical tensions in American culture. The first thing that the small business owner offers us is freedom. Freedom from bad bosses, right? There are no bad bosses at Christmas. Scrooge teaches us that. People can be in control of their own lives. They use their businesses to build their identity. It's their life goal, their creative outlet, their dream. It's also a way for individuals to prove their self-sufficiency and their grit, their merit, and their independence. We have these characters over and over again saying they don't want help. They want to be able to accomplish something on their own. There's one film even where a man works through a heart attack because he's so committed to his small business.
Because that's a good idea.
I know. Real longevity strategy there. So on the one hand, you have this incredible freedom. But it's freedom that can be scary, exhausting, lonely maybe. So you have the other side of the coin of the fantasy. And that's where the small business, in the context of Hallmark, doesn't harm people's familial relations. Actually, it helps them. The small business is the glue that keeps the family together, because in so many of these films, it is the small business where our characters connect. We have a father and daughter who go into business together. We have love interests. He owns an inn. She owns a marketing company. He needs business. Well, wonderful. They can work together. And so in these instances, you don't need to balance work and life because they are the same thing. You also mentioned some of the sort of economic tensions that these films tend to paper over. And that family label that I'm talking about, the idea that the small business supports family, that becomes important there too. Because in the context of these films, family is this very loose label that gets applied not only to the owner and their relatives, but also to customers, also to employees. So there's no possible tension between these various groups, as there would be maybe in real life. So in many cases, these groups have different economic interests. Not so in the Hallmark holiday film. In the Hallmark holiday film, they're all family. They'll all sacrifice for each other. They have a sense of shared obligation. I'll give you one of my favorite examples. And I should say across these films, they just use the word family over and over again to refer to customers, to refer to employees. But my favorite example of this particular 2022 slate is called Christmas at the Golden Dragon. And it is one of those films that was trying to improve Hallmark's representation. So it stars a Chinese family. The parents run a Chinese restaurant called the Golden Dragon. And the parents are deciding to close the restaurant, which is fine. They're adult children. They're doing great. But the Golden Dragon is so important to the entire community that everyone comes together to have one last hurrah, one last meal at the Golden Dragon before it closes. And so you have employees who were just laid off, who just lost their jobs. You have customers and their small children all coming in to work for free at this restaurant to center their holiday experience around a small business. And this all climaxes in a scene where everyone decorates the Christmas tree at the Golden Dragon. And when I say these films emphasize the small business as the center of family, this is really evident in this tree decorating scene. So this incredible sequence where this entire town is coming together to volunteer for a business so that they can recognize how important the business was to the community. I mean, think about what this would look like, everyone coming to Domino's, right? Everybody working a shift for free. Not necessarily something we would expect. And so all of these characters from the town are bringing deeply personal family ornaments to decorate this tree. And when I say deeply personal, I mean one character is bringing a medal that they brought with them when they immigrated from Guadalajara. Another character is bringing a handprint of their child that was previously given to a deceased parent. Truly imagine what this would look like if you showed up to Target with your most precious ornament, the ornament that you put on your tree every year. In the context of this film, that really intimate, personal Christmas ritual takes place at the small business. They are the heart and soul of the community. They are the heart and soul of the town. And so any kind of potential conflict that you might have between employees, bosses, customers, that is completely resolved with the label of family. The other place where the small business owner smooths over some tensions or sidesteps political questions of taxes and welfare and things that people already see as these tense and fraught conversations is in the way that they take care of the small town, and they do it through volunteerism. The small business owner in these films does so much to provide jobs, sometimes to provide housing, to provide food, to provide childcare for their entire communities. In the context of Christmas and Christmas celebrations, Not only do they volunteer to take care of people in various ways, small businesses are making so many charitable donations. They run toy and book drives, they donate fudge, they donate groceries, handmade pies, they donate clothes, they give free trolley rides, they sponsor tree lightings, they sponsor parades, crafting events, Victorian strolls, whatever that is. They run the Christmas market, they play Santa. In one case, they literally are Santa. In all of these situations, the small business owner really is the glue that holds the community together. They make sure that people don't go hungry. They make sure that people have homes, and they do it voluntarily. So they are not compelled by taxes. They are not compelled by democratically elected officials who decide how we want to apportion goods and services in society. The small business owner is the virtuous, upstanding character that will take care of their small town.
Your research looks at how these frameworks can impact how we see things. So I'm wondering, how does a movie like A Christmas Cookie Catastrophe, and that is a real Hallmark movie title,
yes,
by
of
the way.
course I've seen it, yeah.
How does that influence our broader societal beliefs about success, fairness, and the American dream? Are these narratives a reflection or an influence of real-world attitudes?
The question of real-world influence is really what got me interested in this work, because I wanted to have a better sense of how our understanding of particular economic characters shaped real-world policy. And so we can think of other characters alongside the small business owner, characters like the taxpayer or the shareholder or the welfare queen, these characters that star in stories that are used, that are repeated over and over again, sometimes by politicians, both to support and justify certain kinds of legislation or policy or that sort of thing. I'll give you an example of some of the policy that I was thinking of as I was watching these Hallmark films and thinking about the small business owner in particular. So we're talking early 2020s. This is the era of a lot of pandemic policy that is designed to help various groups weather the storm of that crisis. And I was really struck by the fact, if you remember the PPP loans, the Paycheck Protection Program loans, those were designed for small businesses. And of course, we've talked about the fact that the businesses that are defined as small in that context were maybe a little bit bigger than we would think of. And I was struck by the fact that the Paycheck Protection Program loans, the program that was designed for small business, those loans were forgiven. At the same time, there was a program to forgive student loans, and that program was struck down. Now, all of these policies are statements in some way or another regarding who matters within our culture, who is deserving of government support and who isn't. And so that's really what I was interested in there. It comes down to these questions of who is deserving of government largesse or who deserves taxpayer money. Those budgetary discussions are conversations about who we think the heroes of our economy are, who we think deserves our support. You know, these policy conversations can seem really arcane. They can seem kind of boring when we get into the nitty-gritty of what programs are going to be subsidized, where the tax breaks are going to go. But really, they're conversations about who we think the heroes of our economy are. Who should be the people in charge of making decisions? Who counts as a taxpayer? And who do we really care about as a culture? And I think thinking about the way in which certain characters or narratives get told in popular media is one way for us to see where these conversations are happening.
It's interesting that you're talking about a lot of these real impacts, these kind of down in the weeds things, but Hallmark movies, there's a lot of fantasy in these movies. They're this almost nostalgic ideal that we have that people connect with so much. And, we know these are ridiculous. We know these are far-fetched. Why do we buy into it? Why do these movies resonate so much?
I think it's interesting because Hallmark makes these same kind of movies all year round. If you want to watch a version of Christmas Cookie Catastrophe, but with Easter bunnies, I'm sure you could find it. But they really make their way into mainstream culture during the holiday season. And I wonder if it is because Christmas is a time of exception. It's a time of magic. We have this sense that fantasies and dreams and wishes can come true. Christmas is also a time of connection. It's when a lot of Americans who don't have a ton of vacation time might actually have time to spend with their families, time that they might use to watch these films together. And so I think there's a really lovely mirroring of what we see on screen, characters taking time out of the hustle and the bustle to really focus on what matters to them, focus on their communities, focus on their families. And that's just so lovely. And so I think that fantasy is really, really appealing. And, also sometimes I think you just want to see full-grown adults drink hot chocolate like it's the only beverage that ever been invented.
In your view, how could these movies maybe better address those realities of our current system?
That is a great question because I almost wonder if you treated the small business in a more realistic way, if it would lose all of the fantasy. As we talked about, it is extremely hard to run a small business. It takes away from your family. There are many ways in which it is antithetical to what we're meant to be doing during the holiday season, taking time, reflecting, and doing that sort of thing. What you have me thinking of is You've Got Mail and The Shop Around the Corner, two Christmas movies. The Shop Around the Corner being the original, You've Got Mail being the adaptation with Tom Hanks and
Meg Ryan.
Meg Ryan,
yep.
Yes, yeah. And so if you're looking for a more realistic movie about small business, it might be that one where Meg Ryan runs this beautiful small business that everybody loves. And by the end of the movie, that store has been closed and it has been taken over by the big business that is run by Tom Hanks's character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she even ends up working for him.
Yes. So you have the resolution, the romantic resolution, kind of papers over the fact that there are parts of that film that are quite painful where she's having to say goodbye to this beautiful store. That is maybe the most realistic small business while still being the Hollywood version that I can think of. I don't necessarily think that people go to Hallmark for realism.
So maybe there's something about that we like having that stepping out of the reality.
Another way some of these Christmas stories could be told would be without the small business and thinking about other collectivities of people and of care where people come together and support each other, whether it's a group of friends, whether it's a mutual aid group, whether it's your union. There are other organizations that do a lot of that kind of community care, but remain invisible. So it could be looking to other parts of our culture, other parts of our society, where that kind of caretaking is happening, but isn't quite vaulted as the small business owner.
I'm trying to imagine a union Christmas story.
I'd watch it.
Reunion.
Yeah, Christmas reunion, but with the U capitalized. I love it.
It would definitely be a different trajectory.
Yeah. Hey, solidarity forever, Christmas solidarity.
So my last question, because I just got to ask, after watching 40-plus Hallmark movies, what was your favorite?
Oh, boy, what a question. If we're talking about the small business owner and we want to think about a film where that is really prevalent, there's this film called We Wish You a Married Christmas. And the movie basically centers around a town of 513 people, somewhere rural, maybe upstate New York or something like that. And the town seems to be populated entirely by small business owners. And we're talking somebody runs an inn, somebody has a tree farm, somebody has a llama farm. I don't know how you sustain a llama farm in a town of 513 people, but they make it work. And the entire purpose of the town is to rescue the marriages of fighting couples coming up from New York City. So basically, these couples will check in, they're fighting, and then all of the small business owners collaborate to make them do cute small town things, engage with local shopping and that sort of thing. And that's enough for them to rekindle their love. So that's a pretty good one. If you want to watch a lot of small businesses at once, We Wish You a Merry Christmas is a good place to start.
Like they don't have enough jobs. Now they got to be therapists too.
Oh, I know. They are. There are multiple films, actually, where the small business owner is referred to a therapist with pie, that kind of thing. Yep. So they're not only taking care of the economic health of the town, providing jobs, providing homes, they're also maintaining the culture of the town through a ritual, people's mental health. They really do it all.
So many rules. Oh my gosh. Well, I think you've given us a lot to think about when we watch our next Hallmark movie. I know I probably will never look at them the same way again. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. It's been great.
That was CSU Film and Media Studies professor Kit Hughes, speaking about her research into one of the most beloved tropes behind many Hallmark movies. I'm your host, Stacey Nick, and you're listening to CSU's The Audit.